Decades of self-esteem boosting programs in schools produced more narcissism, not more confidence. The whole framework was built on a misunderstanding. Traditional self-esteem is built on a shaky foundation. It's contingent, meaning it rises when you succeed and falls when you fail, moving in direct response to outcomes rather than resting on anything stable underneath. A good performance review, a compliment, a win at something you care about, self-esteem climbs. A mistake, a rejection, a public failure, it drops, sometimes sharply. On the surface, this looks like a reasonable feedback system, but it means your basic sense of worth as a person is never actually settled. It's constantly being recalculated based on the most recent piece of evidence, good or bad. This creates a genuinely fragile relationship with yourself, because it means you're only ever as good as your last outcome. And the next disappointment, a missed deadline, an awkward conversation, a project that didn't land, has the power to collapse a sense of self-worth that felt solid just days earlier. People who rely heavily on this kind of contingent self-esteem often become quietly obsessed with performance and achievement, not because they love the work itself, but because performing well is the only mechanism they have for keeping their sense of worth above water. The exhausting part isn't the striving. It's that the striving never actually resolves anything permanently, because the next evaluation is always coming, and the entire system has to be rebuilt from scratch every single time. Psychologist Kristin Neff's research draws a sharp and important line between self-esteem and a related but very different concept, self-compassion. Self-esteem, as conventionally understood, is evaluative. It measures your worth against some standard of success, attractiveness, or competence, and fluctuates based on how you measure up. Self-compassion works on an entirely different axis. It involves treating yourself with the same warmth, patience, and understanding you would naturally offer a close friend who was struggling, regardless of whether that struggle involved a failure, a flaw, or a setback. Crucially, self-compassion doesn't require you to have succeeded at anything in order to access it. It's available in the moments of failure specifically, which is exactly when contingent self-esteem tends to disappear. Neff's studies found that self-compassion predicts long-term well-being, resilience, and emotional stability far more consistently than self-esteem does, in part because it doesn't collapse the moment something goes wrong. People high in self-compassion still feel disappointed after a failure, but they don't spiral into self-attack the way people relying on contingent self-esteem often do, because their sense of worth was never staked on the outcome in the first place. This distinction matters enormously for how people are taught to build confidence. Decades of programs designed to boost self-esteem through praise and achievement may have been optimizing for the wrong variable entirely. The pattern of tying your worth to performance doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's typically built early, in home environments where approval had to be earned rather than being freely given. A child raised in a household where affection and attention increased noticeably after good grades, good behavior, or visible achievement, and cooled noticeably after mistakes or failures, learns a very specific lesson. Love and acceptance are conditional on performance, not guaranteed by simply existing. Some environments make this even more explicit, where mistakes are met not just with disappointment, but with a withdrawal of warmth, a parent going quiet, distant, or visibly less affectionate until the child has somehow made up for the failure. Constant comparison compounds the effect, particularly in households with siblings, where one child's achievements are held up as the standard, the other is measured against, teaching both children that their value is relative and constantly at risk of falling short. None of this usually happens through cruelty or deliberate intent. Most parents who create these dynamics are repeating patterns from their own upbringing without recognizing them. But the outcome for the child is the same, regardless of intent. An adult who has internalized the belief that they are only as good as their most recent accomplishment, and who feels a persistent, low-grade anxiety about what happens to their worth the moment that accomplishment fades from view. Low self-worth has a distinct and recognizable behavioral pattern once you learn to spot it. It shows up as compulsive validation seeking, refreshing a phone repeatedly after posting something, needing frequent reassurance in relationships, feeling unsettled until someone confirms that a decision or an outcome was good enough. It shows up, somewhat counterintuitively, as an inability to simply accept a compliment, deflecting it, downplaying it, or immediately redirecting credit elsewhere, because accepting it at face value would require believing something the person doesn't actually feel is true about themselves. It shows up as near constant comparison to others, scanning for evidence of where you rank relative to peers, colleagues, or strangers online, using that ranking as a stand-in for a stable sense of self that never quite develops on its own. And underneath all of it runs a specific, exhausting belief that your value as a person is always precisely one failure away from collapsing entirely, no matter how much evidence of competence or worth has accumulated up to this point. This is why external achievements rarely settle the issue for long. A promotion, an award, a milestone might quiet the anxiety for a few days or weeks, but because the underlying belief was never actually resolved, the anxiety returns as soon as the next challenge or evaluation appears on the horizon, and the entire cycle of proving worth starts over again. When self-worth is contingent on performance, failure doesn't produce simple disappointment. It produces shame, and the difference between those two responses is enormous. Disappointment says, "That outcome wasn't what I wanted, and I can learn from it and try again." Shame says something categorically different. "I am fundamentally defective as a person, and this failure has revealed it." For someone whose sense of worth is tied entirely to outcomes, a mistake isn't just information about a specific situation, it's treated as evidence about their core identity, proof of an underlying inadequacy that the failure merely exposed rather than caused. This is why people caught in this pattern often respond to relatively minor setbacks: a piece of critical feedback, a small mistake at work, a plan that didn't come together, with a level of emotional devastation that seems disproportionate to an outside observer, but makes complete sense from the inside, because the stakes were never really about the specific outcome. They were about whether the person is fundamentally acceptable, and that question feels like it's being relitigated every single time something goes wrong. Over time, this generates a kind of chronic hypervigilance around performance, where even small risks start to feel unacceptably dangerous, because the emotional cost of failing isn't just disappointment. It's a fresh confirmation of the deepest fear the person carries about themselves. Building a more stable sense of worth requires a specific and deliberate shift, separating your value as a person from your current performance, so the two stop being treated as the same thing. This isn't about lowering standards or pretending outcomes don't matter. It's about relocating where your fundamental sense of worth comes from, so that a bad outcome becomes disappointing rather than identity-threatening. Self-compassion practices are one of the most evidence-backed tools for this shift. Deliberately extending yourself the same patience and understanding after a mistake that you'd offer a friend in the same position, rather than defaulting to harsh self-criticism. Inner critic work involves noticing the specific voice that shows up after a failure, the one that jumps straight to, "You're not good enough," and learning to question it rather than automatically believing it, treating it as one interpretation among several, rather than an objective verdict. And identity statements rooted in values rather than outcomes. I am a curious person. I am someone who shows up for people I care about. Build a foundation of self-worth that doesn't depend on winning, succeeding, or being the best at anything. None of these tools eliminate the sting of failure entirely. What they do is stop failure from being treated as a referendum on whether the person is allowed to feel okay about themselves. Unconditional self-worth is not earned by performing better. It is built by learning to be with yourself regardless of performance. Once you see the pattern up close, it stops feeling like a mystery and starts feeling like something you can work with.